Tak hanya di negara maju seperti Amerika Serikat, pertumbuhan bisnis startup juga meningkat pesat di negara-negara berkembang di kawasan Asia Tenggara, termasuk Indonesia. Hal ini terlihat dari jumlah bisnis startup di Indonesia yang mencapai lebih dari 1.000 dan terdiri dari berbagai jenis. Menurut data startupranking.com, jumlah bisnis startup di Indonesia merupakan yang terbanyak di Asia Tenggara dengan jumlah hampir 1.500 dan berada di peringkat 3 dunia di bawah Amerika Serikat dan India. Startup di Indonesia berkembang di berbagai sektor, di antaranya e-commerce atau perdagangan elektronik, jasa profesional, serta fintech atau layanan keuangan berbasis teknologi. Perkembangan startup juga tak lepas dari tingginya investasi startup di Indonesia. Indonesia masuk 2 besar pendanaan terbesar bisnis startup di Asia Tenggara pada 2016. Menurut data Tech in Asia 2016, jumlah investasi startup di Indonesia 967 juta dolar Amerika di bawah Singapura yang mencapai 1,4 miliar dolar. Investasi terbesar terdapat di startup aplikasi jasa transportasi Gojek yang mencapai 550 juta dolar, diikuti startup e-commerce Tokopedia sebesar 147 juta dolar. Bisnis startup e-commerce diperkirakan akan semakin meningkat seiring dengan meningkatnya jumlah masyarakat kelas menengah. Selain itu, perubahan gaya hidup masyarakat yang semakin dinamis mendorong penggunaan teknologi dan internet untuk memenuhi berbagai kebutuhan. Graviardi Kresnantyo, CNN, Indonesia.
Ya, untuk pertama kali Global Ventures Summit diadakan di Bali, di Indonesia. Nah, summit ini mengumpulkan para pemikir inovator dan juga para investor ya, dari pemberi modal Ventura, angel investor dan juga startup, yaitu bisnis startup terutama yang berkaitan dengan digital technology. Dan tentu saja ini merupakan suasana yang sangat menarik karena Indonesia saat ini juga bermimpi untuk melahirkan banyak sekali startup baru yang diharapkan bisa membantu meningkatkan perekonomian Indonesia, khususnya dalam ekonomi kreatif. Nah, Insight kali ini akan berjumpa dengan beberapa pemain yang hadir pada Global Ventures Summit ini. Ada yang dari lokal dan tentu saja ada yang dari internasional, terutama dari Silicon Valley, Amerika Serikat, yaitu tempat di mana biasanya seperti kita ketahui para inovator terkemuka di dunia ini dilahirkan dan melahirkan produk-produknya. Ada 2 tamu bersama saya dari Indonesia, dari MDI Metra Digital Innovation, Nicko Widjaja ya, CEO. Wow, CEO masih muda tapi ya. Sekarang kalau kita bicara CEO, tampangnya itu muda-muda sekali. Ya, dan ada dari Epic Ventures, Calder, Director. Chris, welcome you all the way from the
Salt
US.
Lake City, Utah, and Silicon Valley.
Wow, and then you flew all the way here to
Correct.
Bali. Your first time?
First day. Yes.
First time, first day.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope you're enjoying it so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And this is, I mean, Bali is an exciting place to be, of course. And I was just saying that when we talk about, you know, in companies of nowadays, when the directors and CEOs, it's no longer old people. It's all, you know, young people. Now, let's focus a little bit on the Global Venture Summits. And I was telling the audience, ya, seperti kita ketahui, salah satu yang biasanya menjadi kendala atau ya justru peluang ya dalam melahirkan startup yang sukses itu biasanya inovasi, ya, teknologi, tapi juga pendanaan. Nah, di sini mungkin Nicko yang dibutuhkan. Apa sih sebenarnya peran para pemberi modal Ventura atau venture capitals dalam membangun sebuah startup yang sukses?
Pemberi modal sebenarnya lebih melihat stages, Mbak, dari pendanaan. Jadi tahapan. MDI sendiri kami berinvestasi di seri A ke atas. Seri A berarti perusahaan yang sudah memiliki traction yang baik, memiliki revenue yang baik, fundamental yang cukup baik.
Jadi ada track recordnya?
Ada historicalnya lah.
Biasanya berapa lama historicalnya yang
tergantung dari runway-nya juga, runway investasi. Jadi biasanya kalau sebelum seri A itu seed stage. Seed stage juga tidak ada waktunya sebenarnya sih. Tapi dari runway yang diberikan oleh investor pendahulu atau investor yang sekarang atau bagaimana gitu ya, itu terlihat gitu dari modal yang diberikan di tahapan ini, achievementnya segini gitu loh ya kan, dan itu yang menjadi dasar bagi kami untuk berinvestasi. Dan role venture capital sebenarnya atau investor di bidang teknologi, especially emerging teknologi gitu kan ya kan, adalah melihat siklus dari penggunaan teknologi ini di pasar ya, di market ya kan. Because not many people have this background to see whether the product atau teknologi yang di develop oleh beberapa founders akan menjadi sesuatu yang baik di kemudian hari. So I think the role of venture capitals atau the role of tech investors adalah pertama kali yang harus adalah percaya kalau I mean this trend of emerging technology will happen sooner or later gitu, daripada kita melihat dengan kacamata yang skeptikal gitu ya terhadap this will not fly atau yang ini tidak akan jalan, tapi melihat bagaimana peluang sih ke depannya gitu.
Ya, jadi pasti sebenarnya kan ada kriteria-kriteria yang harus di tick off itu. Nah, kira-kira apa saja top kriteria yang harus dipenuhi bagi sebuah startup ini sebelum dikatakan bahwa oke, ini layak mendapatkan funding untuk seterusnya.
Oke, mungkin pertama you need to have a good team, ya kan.
Ya, itu biasanya penting ya.
It's impossible when you misalnya are developing misalnya artificial intelligence atau machine learning, but you don't have an engineer yang untuk back that statement gitu kan ya kan. So you need to have very much diverse founders yang memiliki technical aspects di sana juga gitu. Dan especially founder yang juga mengerti gamenya, because when we talk about startups, kita tidak bicara UKM gitu kan ya kan, kita bicara sesuatu yang trajektorinya atau growth yang akan dihasilkan itu ceilingnya jauh di atas dari UKM gitu kan ya kan, dan ini yang masih
kalau bisa internasional bahkan nanti scalability-nya kan.
Of course yes, karena digital juga kan ya kan. I think when you are doing a digital technology, I think it knows no boundaries. Ya, harusnya.
You're looking at the whole world, just looking at your home market.
And the whole world also your competitors gitu. Jadi kalau misalnya ada seorang founder gitu ya, jadi sebenarnya world view yang ingin kita cari juga nih. Jadi misalnya ada founder yang datang ke kami menceritakan mengenai idenya gitu, tapi waktu ditanya mengenai kompetitor, jawabannya selalu nggak ada di Indonesia. Nah, nggak ada di Indonesia ini sangat bahaya banget gitu, because everybody else akan datang ke sini dan will take a piece of your market gitu kan ya kan. Ada banyak contoh juga sih di sini. Misalnya saya pernah ketemu founder yang mengerjakan music app gitu kan ya kan. This is way before Apple Music gitu. Waktu saya tanya who's your competitor, jawabannya adalah di Indonesia nggak ada yang seperti ini, because we have Indonesia, the biggest Indonesia label Indonesia inventory of songs gitu kan ya kan. Nah, terus 8 bulan kemudian datanglah Apple Music with a list of inventory lagu Indonesia juga ya kan. And then this company cease to exist basically in the next few months gitu kan. Dan itu juga menjadi jadi pemikiran founder itu backgroundnya yang kita cari gitu. Punya pengertian yang luas gak sih mengenai kategori yang ingin dilakukan gitu kan ya kan.
Jadi di situ visinya ada, tapi teamworknya juga dan tentu saja expertise ya.
Dan eksekusi paling penting. Eksekusinya. Jadi kita lihat track recordnya juga sih, pernah ngapain gitu kan ya kan.
Tapi kan nggak harus otomatis melihat bahwa ini selalu untung atau maksudnya dari financial reportnya itu selalu bagus. Bukan itu kan pada tahap ini yang dicari. Masih
that's why potential. Kita bukan UKM kan ya kan, tapi kan kita bisa melihat benchmark sebenarnya. Let's say if a company, atau founders ya, tim yang mengerjakan misalnya payment gateway misalnya, atau chat app, aplikasi chat ya, itu kan biasanya ingin mengalahkan katanya WhatsApp gitu kan ya kan. Tapi kalau kita ngelihat sendiri gitu, mungkin nggak sih gitu pengguna WhatsApp atau pengguna even BlackBerry, which is BlackBerry is still the highest chat app di Indonesia gitu. Mungkin nggak sih, all these guys gitu, just they are going to convert into your app gitu, dan meninggalkan WhatsApp yang lain. Juga, iya. Realistis dan mengerti tadi sih pandangan terhadap kategorinya ya gitu ya. You cannot tidak bisa membawa something yang memang high spirited lah, misalnya this is a chat app dari Indonesia gitu ya kan, but it doesn't really matter in this age anymore.
Tell me a little bit about Epic Ventures. I mean, how do you in terms of giving investment or funding, is your focus also, you're quite picky about the sort of startups, the sort of...
yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe from the...
focusing on?
From the bits of English that I picked up here and there, I think our investment theses are probably fairly similar. First and foremost, we look for extraordinary entrepreneurs, people that are tenacious and resilient, and have the ability to build a team around them that is talented and qualified for whatever they're going after. We tend to look for really large markets. A $500 million market is generally not large enough for us to make our hurdle rate return. So we're looking for companies that operate in billion to $5 billion markets.
And give us some example of the companies in your portfolio and how, what are the stages that you actually grow them, so to speak.
Sure, totally. So a recent example is a company called Canopy Tax. They build what seems very boring, which is workflow and automation software for tax practitioners, people that fill out your business's taxes or your personal taxes. This is maybe a $300 to $600 million market, but the end game for the company is much larger, which is I don't know that I can talk about it on the air, but building a network of all of these tax practitioners is an asset that they can go leverage to do things that make this a $10 billion opportunity. We got involved in the seed stage when the company was just literally the founder, Kurt. And they've now grown to 60 people, $30 million in funding, and we hope we're well on our way to that $10 billion outcome.
Wow, I mean, these are really large numbers. I mean, I think in Indonesia they're not the, in terms of the funding they get, certainly when we talk about Series A here in Indonesia, berapa jumlah yang biasanya diberikan sebagai funding? Kita tahu Pak, MDI memberikan funding pada tahun 2016 kepada beberapa startup gitu.
Yes.
Rata-rata kan mungkin hanya 10 billion per company atau
nggak juga sih, kita we invested Series A and above gitu kan ya kan. We also have a pre-IPO companies that we invested in
tapi rata-rata berapa
Jepang dan di Korea. Rata-rata Series A ya. I think Series A round normally between in Southeast Asia at least 5 to 15 million US dollar biasanya segitu.
Which would be like
it's pretty.
That sounds probably similar to the markets that we operate in.
Yeah. I think the way Silicon Valley also behaving right today, it's kind of different than what we saw 5 years back. Because when we have an office in Silicon Valley as well. When we went to Silicon Valley, the way investors assess startups, they need a good foundations as well, good fundamentals at least, right? And even some of the startups in Y Combinator, they get follow-on funding once they have seen small profits that they make already. Jadi udah berubah, Mbak. Kalau dulu kan kita invest lihat peluangnya gitu kan ya kan. Tapi karena takut bubble lagi nih di US gitu, jadi sekarang lebih kepada ngelihat fundamentalnya lagi nih, kembali lagi. Jadi udah nggak lagi, let's say you have a great idea, dan you have a good background of the team of the founders gitu ya. Let's put $1 million di sini, nggak juga sih. Sekarang jadi lebih kepada, can this company really make money, right? And that's the issue, because most of the companies like, let's say Twitter or setelah IPO kan bawah jatuh.
Well, I think what's interesting is, we all knew this intuitively since 1998, whenever. but you can't hide from unit economics.
Yes.
Right, and you have to have solid unit economics to
Harus
grow.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
at the end of the day, you do want to get a return for your money. I mean, it's normal,
Absolutely.
it's natural, and that's how you make the economy
Yeah.
grow. But Chris, let me ask you again. Out of all the hundreds of many ideas that come to your table, I mean, how many of those actually bear fruition? Are there any of them that's actually this is something that we have to write off for
Companies?
yes,
Oh
companies.
yeah, absolutely.
Or most of them
absolutely.
are actually quite well.
I think we're probably in line with most venture capital investors, where about 30% of our companies we write off completely. I think if that number was any lower, we wouldn't be ambitious enough. We wouldn't be taking big enough swings. But it is painful to write the companies off. I was on the board of directors of a company that we mostly wrote off about 6 months ago, and it's hard to see. Not only are you personally invested in the company, but the team is invested, and these are their lives and their livelihoods that you're dealing with when these companies transact, and so it is a lot of emotional labor involved.
But what is it like now in the US? Because obviously in Indonesia we're very much still the Wild West. We've only got one unicorn company. We've got this Gojek, but in the US, obviously, it's the home of all very successful startups who's now no longer startups, but the biggest companies in the world. Is the market saturated in the US? Is that why many investors are now looking outside the US, particularly to this part of the world?
Well, let me, I guess I could give you a microcosm of that, which is what we see happening in the emerging startup ecosystems in the US. So Epic's based in Salt Lake City, and we've been investing in places like Utah and Colorado and Oregon and Washington, Southern California for 20 years. These are places where Silicon Valley VCs, they don't want to get on a plane and go fly for some $2 million investment in Utah, right? They want to drive to Palo Alto and go back to San Francisco. We've seen in the last couple of years a renewed interest in these areas, and partners from the most prestigious funds are coming out to Utah. They're going to Portland. They're taking 2 days and they're meeting with every single company they can find, and then they get back on the plane and they fly away. So I would say that there's a lot of competition in the Bay Area. Investors are trying to get creative, trying to get out of that geography, trying to get out into the Wild West, as you mentioned. I think you see that both kind of into the emerging ecosystems in the US. You see that as places like Southeast Asia. But ultimately our belief, and I think the belief of many other investors, is that having boots on the ground, having local relationships, gives you an edge not only in winning investments, but in identifying them early.
And the key winners, the ones who will, the startups that will one day develop into, like a Google or, an Uber. Do you see them? I mean, how do you identify which ones will actually succeed in the long run? What would be the magic ingredients other than some of the stuff that we've mentioned?
I don't think there was anyone that invested in Uber's first 2 rounds of fundings that expected that would happen. I'll give you an anecdote. We took a company called Instructure public a year and a half ago. It's a $700 million market cap company. Not an Uber, but a large and great return for our fund. And the original thesis was that there was an industry with incumbent software that had gotten lazy, it had gotten old, and they were going to go in and build great usable software for this industry. That it was education software, fairly sleepy. I don't think anyone imagined this would be a $700 million exit, but it goes back to the fundamentals mentioned before. It was a great team, it was a great CEO, it was a market where the unit economics worked really well, and it built on itself year after year.
Kalau di Indonesia bagaimana? Karena MDI kan bagian dari Telkom ya. Telkom kan ya istilahnya punya kita semua lah, punya negara. Nah, khusus untuk MDI itu sendiri kan ini sebenarnya kan bagian yang baru ya, baru di set up tahun 2016 ya.
2015,
ya,
15 ya.
masih baru. Ini bagaimana performance dari mereka yang selama ini mendapatkan funding?
MDI, yes. Well, we invest globally, first of all, right? So we do have a mandate to nurture the ecosystem di Indonesia through Indigo Incubator, ya kan? Indigo Creative Nations hari ini namanya. So we co-run Indigo Creative Nations alongside Telkom. That's where I think we should see some of the emerging startup early, that early seed startups. through our through our programs. But MDI alone, we invest why globally, because we need to reduce the risk. We need to de-risk our investment by again, we invest only in good fundamentals. We, being backed by large corporations like Telkom, we can cherry pick the best in Asia. Probably not in the US, but in Japan, Southeast Asia, where Series B round or later stage round is scarce, yeah. I think we have a chance to really pick the right ones, especially the ones with already with profits. Jadi, so instead of investing, I think opportunistically, I think we invest more synergistically. So when we find those companies with good fundamentals, what we do, we're not aiming, to grow them into unicorns, because as we know, unicorns do die, right?
How do you see young Indonesians?
Well, first we have to understand
compared to
the US.
No, we don't have to compare to the US. To our neighboring countries, such as Singapore, for example, or just in the region.
Interesting. I think, gini, landscape di Singapura dan di Indonesia dan Malaysia kurang lebih mirip lah, gitu kan ya kan. I mean, comparing with China or India or even the US, it's going to have different models at works. In the US, you can establish a company without even partnering with corporates, at least in the first and second wave of the internet. That's why Facebook dan yang lainnya bisa maju, because you can just connect people and do something about it. But I read this book by Steve Case, The Third Wave, di mana the third wave companies itu bukan lagi internet ISP seperti yang the first wave atau yang the second wave seperti Facebook, tapi lebih perusahaan yang harus bermitra dengan pemerintah, dengan big corporations, dengan stakeholders yang lain.
Jadi ada social entrepreneurship-nya. It's not just purely entrepreneurship, but social with value for the community at large.
Dan especially these third wave companies itu umumnya ada di emerging market seperti Indonesia dan Singapura, gitu kan ya kan. Nah, itu yang kita ingin explore lebih dalam lagi gitu. So by I think de-risking our investment, not only good fundamentals but companies again yang bisa bekerja sama dengan kita, gitu kan ya kan. Karena saya melihat building a synergy gitu ya di era the next internet revolusi ini, itu akan membutuhkan itu akan paralel dengan transformasi large corporates. Because I think even in China or India, these big corporations mereka lagi transformasi sekarang untuk menjadi pemain digital juga. Jadi nanti
MDI juga akan ke sana arahnya kira-kira, apalagi yang dari inkubator ini.
Yang dari inkubator jelas itu menjadi mandat kita sih untuk terus membantu terus ya.
Bagaimana kualitasnya selama ini yang Anda lihat yang dari inkubator ini? Banyak yang
better.
potensial?
Yes, it's getting better every year. Every year kita melihat sukses rate-nya itu, terus naik ya. Jadi kalau kita melihat dalam inkubator atau akselerator, or even a seed investment, follow-on funding is really important, gitu kan ya kan. Kita melihat di mana startup yang ada di Indigo gitu ya, itu pendanaan follow-on-nya terus meningkat year by year. Hari ini kita di angka 50% lebih kali gitu, dan itu that's almost impossible bagi pemain yang lain gitu hari ini kan ya kan. 50% berarti dari 20 yang diinkubasi 10-nya itu jadi $1 juta company gitu. And that's something yang really exciting to see. Dan kita melihat terus perkembangan ini, Mbak. Dan itu dia makanya I think one of the role di MDI is melihat tadi Indonesia as an ecosystem, bukan hanya sebagai tempat berinvestasi gitu.
Iya, dan ini penting ya, elemen ini penting, apalagi Indonesia memang kebutuhan untuk pengembangan teknologinya itu bisa digunakan misalnya untuk komunitas seperti petani atau masyarakat yang di desa dan untuk misalnya pendidikan dan lain sebagainya juga. Nah, Chris, now that you're in this part of the world, what sort of opportunities, what sort of new ideas would excite you, and would you like to see, and then that would make you decide, okay, this is worth something to put my money in?
Sure. Well, I think, in this part of the world, I think the big opportunity right now is localization. I think everybody probably agrees with that. It's well known. There's a similar market dynamic here to what I've seen in the Middle East and the African continent. Divergent communities, different languages, different cultures, different banking regulations. So I think short term, that's a really interesting opportunity. I'm not qualified to invest in those kind of companies because I don't have the local expertise that would be required. I think the more interesting question, maybe what you're alluding to, is what happens after Indonesia is localized? What happens after Indonesia has a stable and robust banking system and has transportation is already a solved issue? What happens when STEM education is at the level required to build companies domestically at the same frequency that we see in places like Silicon Valley? And that's a question I'm not qualified to answer. I think, people here are more qualified to answer that, but it's something that I find very interesting.
But what would you define as a good idea? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about innovation, and then you do need to come up with something that no one else has thought of, right?
Sure.
I mean, the thing is, why, for example, Uber is so successful because it's the first, so.
Well, there are definitely markets where there's a winner takes most dynamic. I think those are probably the minority. I think what you find when you look at enough startups is that everybody has great ideas, right? I thought of Tinder like a year before Tinder launched, but I didn't do it, right? And that's why I'm here instead of on a yacht somewhere. I think what makes most companies interesting, the common thread between all of the really successful companies I've seen, is that the founding team and the executive team have this relentless focus on their customers and their users. And they get so close to their customers that they understand them better than the competition. So even if there are 5 other companies building something similar, trying to compete in the same space, they're never really competitive because they don't understand the customer and serve them with that same vigor and diligence that whatever company is. So I think that's the common thread for me. And I love to see founders who are ambitious, who are resilient, who are talented, but they also live and breathe for their customer.
At what point does it get for that particular startup? I mean, in the beginning, everybody's young, energetic, idealistic, and then you start growing, and then things start to get a little bit, slows down, and then at what point did you think, okay, this is really we're not going to continue with this anymore, or we need to shake this up? Well,
it's a great question. In Structure, the company I mentioned earlier that we took public last year, there were 3 times, this predates me at Epic, but 3 times that my partners sat around the board table and said, do we shut it down, or do we give them another $300,000? So I don't think it's an easy question to answer. It depends a lot on the founding team and how much stamina they have left in them. A lot of times the founding team just has had enough, and at that point you're not going to cut another check. But in the cases where the founding team wants to continue to work, they want to continue to build the business, I think it comes down to what you really think the most likely outcome is. It's hard to say as a rule.
Ke depan ya, MDI bagaimana?
I think this is the beauty of venture investment, because we're not the, for most of the deals, we're not the sole investors in the, even in the round. So
which also presents its own
it's
problems.
It's syndications, right? Yeah, it's a syndication of many investors putting their money into a round. So I think the best answer ya untuk ini adalah kapan kita stop percaya gitu kan? When are we stop believing in this company and let everybody else take the part in the next round or in the next runway? I think kalau di saya is if the company failed to meet the target that they planned before we put our money in, I think that's the kind of signal that we have to stop supporting this company until.
Does that happen quite a lot?
Of course, happen, pasti. I think, of course, I mean, but sometimes it's not their fault though. It's because sometimes, let's say there's one company that we invested in relying upon, let's say, e-commerce landscape in Southeast Asia. When the trend was down, then the company drag along with it, ya kan? Pasti ikut ke bawah juga gitu. But jadi, so most of the time we just waited until this band of guys can convince the next round investors. Ya. Bagi MDI sebenarnya begini, lebih baik kita kehilangan bukan kehilangan ya, but kehilangan opportunity to invest cheap, tapi aman.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us, Chris dan juga Nicko. Terima kasih banyak ya, sukses selalu dan semoga semakin banyak ya perusahaan-perusahaan startup yang dibantu sehingga tumbuh berkembang. Ya, demikian wawancara kita bersama dua anggota dari Global Venture Summit dari Venture Capital ya. Setelah yang berikut ini kita akan berbincang dengan seseorang lagi. Siapa dia yang setelah berikut ini? Ya, kita lanjutkan insight masih seputar Global Venture Summit. Tadi kita sudah mendengarkan bagaimana sebuah startup itu mendapatkan investasi atau pendanaan apa-apa saja yang dibutuhkan dan biasanya apa yang dicari oleh para investor ketika mendanai sebuah startup. Nah, sekarang kita mungkin fokus lebih ke produk-produk yang bisa diciptakan oleh sebuah perusahaan startup, khususnya yang mungkin akan memiliki masa depan dan peluang yang lebih jangka panjang dan juga menarik bagi para investor. Sudah bersama saya adalah Ninou Sarwono dari Emerging Technology dari Capital Group yang berdasarkan di Los Angeles, Amerika Serikat. Hai Ninou, apa kabar?
Halo Mbak Desi.
Ninou sebenarnya orang Indonesia, tapi sudah lama di LA.
Yes, I've been living there for 20 years, udah 20 tahun.
Jadi udah mulai lupa dalam bahasa Indonesianya, oke. Tapi masih orang Indonesia kan?
Masih proudly Indonesian.
Ya, dan kita bangga sekali karena Ninou juga sekarang lebih fokus di emerging technology itu ke technology. I mean, tell us a little bit about what you do at emerging technology.
Yeah, so I lead our emerging technology function at Capital Group. Capital Group is a 80+ years mutual fund company. So we built mutual funds and we serve about 22+ million shareholders, primarily in the US market. Overall, we manage about $1.4 trillion asset under management.
Oh, wow.
And so part of
quite big, yeah?
It is quite big. We're a private company.
And is it global?
It is. We have global footprint in terms of our investment. We also serve institutional clients around the world. So as part of that company, we formed last year a emerging technology group that really focusing on scouting, researching, experimenting, and even leading the industry on how do we think about emerging technologies.
Nah, kalau kita bicara mengenai emerging technology, what do you mean by emerging technology?
Great question. What we meant by emerging technology simply is simply technology that may still be underdeveloped, may still be not fully mature yet, but enough, that you can use to create business impact. For example, a lot of what you've heard is a lot of companies, startups are focusing on building artificial intelligence products. A good example of that is actually one of the startup that is here in this event is called Calder.ai. It's a good example of how they're using artificial intelligence technologies to build a different customer servicing experience for brands like Unilevers and others. So that's one category of emerging technology. And within the AI space, there is so many different sub-segments. There's machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, and text mining, speech recognition. A lot of it is a huge umbrella of technologies. But there's also other emerging technologies that you may or may not heard before, and it's called blockchain. If you heard what it's called Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a digital currency.
Yeah, it's a currency that you can trade, you can use like normal money, but it doesn't exist basically, other than in online or virtual.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Bitcoin is actually not the Bitcoin, it's the underlying technology called blockchain. So as an example, what it means by blockchain. So blockchain, by definition, is a shared distributed ledger technology. So in a way, you and I can share information, and the software guarantees, the technology guarantees that there is some level of integrity of the information. So by having that characteristics, now you can simply build a new business model bypassing the man in the middle. So for Capital Group, this is a very,
So basically, you work together alongside these startups.
Yeah. So for what we do, Emerging Technology Group, we love startups, and the reason why is because they're the one that typically bring bear a lot of these emerging technologies and build products on top of it. So we love working with startups. Just the fact that they are, they're the early adopters of those technologies, and we can benefit from it a lot.
So how do you follow and make sure that this emerging technology will one day become just a regular?
Absolutely. So great question around the emerging technology adoption and scaling. From what our perspective is that any new technologies or emerging technology that is still quite underdeveloped, but is still something that you can use immediately, we see them as a potential competitive differentiator. In fact, in some cases, we call it competitive weapon, because we really believe by using those emerging technologies, we could differentiating ourselves, and we could be leading in that effort. Now, back to your question, eventually, yes, those emerging technologies will become mainstream. And this is why why our function exists, because we want to get out there. We want to work with the academics. We want to work with a lot of the startups, no matter where they are. So in fact, one of the reasons why I'm here is because we hope that there are emerging technology companies, fintech companies coming from Indonesia that we can take advantage of and that we can partner with and co-develop new solutions, whether that's intended for the Indonesian market or the global or US market.
Okay, walk me through how does a technology, most emerging technologies always sound like a great idea, good idea, but how does it go from being a good idea and then it gets adopted and then you scale it up? Because, for example, we've seen really exciting stuff such as wearable.
Absolutely. Yes.
Things that you can wear, and whether it's your smartwatch or it's anything that can make you fit and so on. But then it doesn't really, So what happened to that?
So I look at it. There's emerging technologies that are very, very shiny, and we tend to actually not to get close to it, because to your earlier point, it looks cool, but does it actually create business impact? And for us, that's the most important part, is to create business impact. If we don't see a value, the application of it immediately, we may want to just kind of slow down and just monitor them, as opposed to really leading the effort to advance the technologies or even become a fast follower. So for us, as an enterprise, we look at the business case. We look at the business impact and how we think the technology could either increase our operational efficiencies, or that can help us build new investment products that nobody else has built, or that we can change the industry ecosystem. So we look at it that way. Now, your point about wearable and others that are not taking off, I think the consumer space, emerging technology in the consumer space, has a completely different path of adoption. And obviously, to that end, there's really two different ways to think about it. One is, there are certain companies that are really good at positioning the product, and not only
great marketing.
Exactly.
It looks wonderful.
Exactly.
And everybody's excited, but then
Exactly. But then it doesn't meet the needs. It doesn't meet the needs. It doesn't meet the basic human needs. So I think as a startup, if you are working in the emerging technology, focusing on consumers, you've got to look at it from the angle that, are you somebody like Steve Jobs who actually create the needs? Well, people may say...
need that we didn't have to begin with.
Exactly.
But now we cannot live without.
Exactly. That's a great point on iPhone, right? And all these other devices.
I can live without the wearable technology.
Yeah, at the same time, you could also think about it from the perspective that, you know what? There is simply a need to have a technology that helps deliver product services, the last mile delivery. So a company like Gojek, for example, in Indonesia, that is a good example of their meeting the needs that maybe, you know, we never had, we don't know that we actually had that need. So
yes, but that needs is with the Gojek, you know, the motorcycles are there, you know, everything is very real. The only thing is that you have the app that allows you to connect all these various bits. Now, when it comes to things like real technology that changes the way you live and changes the way you communicate or how you, you know, you exercise or you check your health and so on and so forth, which brings me back to what the next emerging technology. You mentioned AI. You know, lots of science fiction film, robots. Is this really, is this something that the consumer would one day feel comfortable about interacting with AI, or what sort of AI?
It comes down to the basic needs, and that is trust. So in fact, in general, when you think about interacting with a non-human, it comes down to the basic human principles, and that is, can you build trust with the other, whether that's human or non-human? Can you build that trust? So, you know, for example, if you can click on something and then give you a response, you're going to start having that trust, right? So when we think about from that perspective, so all of these emerging technologies, whether it's robotics, whether that's blockchain, whether that's Bitcoin, whether that's something else.
The factories are now using robots, basically, automation.
And robots, physical robots, it comes down to, can they really deliver what people, human, would be expecting? It comes down to a very simple thing. And the other thing too is about consumer technology. It's sometimes it's the degree that the technology in itself reduce the friction. So the less friction that you're interacting with technology, most likely you want to use it. Now, obviously, in some cases, you know, you still need to use, you know, the pen on top of a phone, right? But you know, there's really two things from my perspective. Is that one is trust. Can you trust that technology, whether that's emerging or not, whether that's a physical device or a software? The second thing to me is about how can that technology reduce the friction, right? So if you have to do 5 clicks or 5 interactions to get, you know, what you expected to get done, that technology most likely is not going to.
But would you put your money on, say, an AI technology?
So a great question. I really believe that, in fact, you know, what my observation in the last 3 days, there hasn't been any startup in Indonesia focusing on AI. Specifically on AI, I really believe that there is a winner-takes-all paradigm here. So that means if anybody who can come up with a vertical AI solution, that company would most likely dominate. And that's what we're seeing in the U.S. market. I mean, a lot of the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, they're really good on building what is called more of the horizontal AI technology. So very generic. They're building tools so that people can develop on top of it. But the key differentiator is that you want to build an AI-based technology or solution or product that is very niche to a particular given domain. And that requires business expertise and domain expertise.
Okay, Ninou, now you're back in Indonesia, at least for the Global Ventures Summit. What sort of innovation and technology do you think that we could actually develop and create here in Indonesia? Because we're great users of technology, but as consumers, particularly social media. but that's not the same thing as creating
Yeah,
new
so
technology that solves everyday problems.
I really believe that the great opportunity here is, I mean, throughout the conference, we heard a lot about startups focusing on consumer space. But if you actually compare it to the US market, the enterprise market, meaning that you're building solution for businesses to use, not directly for consumers to use, that market is actually bigger than consumer space. So to me, when I look at a lot of the startups, and I talk to some of the local VCs as well, I think the enterprise market is where it's right for somebody to do something about it. So the technology that you can use, so here is why we exist, Emerging Technology Group at Capital, is because back in the days, you have to have a big hardware, you have to have a huge talent pool to be able to develop the solutions, whether that's for consumer, for enterprise. These days, you can basically talk to the Google guys. They will most likely give you a free account, and then you can build solution on top of that. And not only that you can build solutions, but let's assume that there's huge demand of that solution. You can scale easily. Back in like 4 years ago, you cannot do that. So the barrier to technology development is so much closer now.
Cheaper as well.
And cheaper, absolutely. And the playing field is so flat. So I heard throughout the conference that the world is flat. It's true. And this is why we when we scan companies, we scan not just the US market, but also other markets. In fact, we're already doing that. So back to your questions about where could be the opportunity, to me, the enterprise market is where the next big opportunities. I mean, e-commerce and consumer facing is still going to be attractive because of the sheer number of populations, but there's still also challenges in terms of internet penetration, in terms of digital literacy. So I really believe that the enterprise software could be the the next big wave that somebody should start thinking about it.
So maybe the next step would be actually how to create a technology that gets you to interact with your fellow beings and your surroundings. And I think the Pokemon model is interesting. Do you remember when that Pokemon,
of course,
and everybody starts going out looking at, getting into the fresh air and looking for things in real life?
Absolutely. The technology helps people connect with others. The technology helps build communities. And to your point about Pokemon, that's really what it is. Even though right now it's probably it has tapered off in the last.
But this idea of augmented reality is something that is quite exciting. That's
absolutely. I think you asked about the consumer space. To me, the augmented reality could be that next type of emerging technology that could really take off, and that, I mean, you've seen that already. You've seen that application of it. I mean, obviously, Pokemon is a good example, combining digital imagery to sort of like the natural surroundings, and then you use the mesh of the two to be able to play a game, and then you have a game element to that as well, right? So that really is an interesting phenomenon. I think there's more applicability of that even on the non-consumer space, the enterprise space.
Really exciting.
Yeah.
Although I still like to read a good old-fashioned book,
I do too, actually. I print out in some cases, I print out some materials and then read it over on my bed. I still love to do that. I mean, all those things will still exist, right?
Yeah, it's just we have more choices and less time.
Exactly.
Well, Ninou, thank you very much for joining us. And do you come down to Indonesia, visit us here in Indonesia quite often, or are you well and settled in LA, in Silicon Valley?
That's the dilemma. I think, obviously, I still visit my family. My big family is still in Indonesia, my mom and my brothers. So every year I go visit. We love to come to Bali and to Indonesia. Still very much the case.
Okay, jadi masih sering.
Masih sering.
Masih kangen nih.
Masih kangen sama makanannya.
Ya, sama makanan. Tapi di LA juga kan banyak bisa beli makanan Indonesia. Komunitas Indonesianya kan juga banyak.
Yes.
Sekali lagi terima kasih Ninou, dan demikian insight kali ini menarik sekali ya. Ternyata Yang namanya ide atau kreativitas itu memang tidak habis-habisnya ya. Setiap orang mungkin bisa melahirkan ratusan ide. Tapi apakah ide itu kemudian bisa dijadikan sebuah produk yang nanti digunakan oleh orang banyak dan yang lebih penting lagi dijadikan sebuah bisnis yang sukses? Nah, itu tentu tantangannya. Demikian insight kali ini dari Global Ventures Summit. Saya Desi Anwar. Terima kasih. Bye-bye.
You're really good.